In 2008, the Weinsteins began development on a fourth Scream. Kevin Williamson was brought on to write the script with the intention that Scream 4 would be the start of a new trilogy. Encouraged by Williamson's script, Wes Craven signed on to direct, and the main acting trio of Neve Campbell, David Arquette, and Courtney Cox agreed to reprise their roles. Bob Weinstein had concerns about the film's ending, which was intended to be a cliffhanger. Weinstein wanted a definitive happy ending. This reportedly caused a conflict with Williamson, who was not happy with the change. During production, Scream 3 writer Aaron Kruger was brought on to do rewrites. The script ended up being around 140 pages. For those who don't know, one page of a script usually translates to 1 minute of screen time, so this version of the movie would have been a little less than 2.5 hours long. The story takes place 10 years after the events of Scream 3 on the anniversary of the original Woodsboro murders. Sidney has returned home to promote a self-help book, but her return is met with a new killer intent on making Sidney suffer. Gale and Dewey are intent on solving the case, but Dewey doesn't want to involve Gale now that he's the sheriff. The film introduces a new group of characters as well. Sid's cousin Jill takes center stage alongside her friends Kirby and Olivia, Jill's ex-boyfriend Trevor, and two geeks, Charlie and Robbie. Jill and Charlie turn out to be the killers in an attempt to become famous survivors as Sidney had. Jill betrays Charlie with the intent to frame him and Trevor. Jill seemingly kills Sidney, but she survives, leading to a confrontation in the hospital in which Sidney electrocutes Jill before shooting her. There's a lot to get into with this movie because it's a mess, but there's a lot about it that works. The movie feels like it's being made up as it goes along. It's really obvious that it was heavily rewritten, and there were clearly a lot of hasty edits in post. There are conflicting ideas and themes, threads that are introduced or hinted at but go absolutely nowhere. One of these is the remake idea. For me, the story ended with Scream 3. There never needed to be another Scream film after that. But the trend of horror remakes that plagued us for a solid decade were ripe for parody and satire. It was a good idea to bring Scream back and force the characters to live through an in-universe reboot. But the movie barely does anything with it. According to Craven, this element was much more pronounced in Williamson's original drafts, but got lessened. But it was also lessened in the editing room. There are deleted scenes that showcase stronger parallels to the original. But the idea wasn't cut entirely, so in the finished film, it feels like a half-baked idea. And it doesn't work. For example, the movie tries to liken Olivia's death to Tatum's. And there are a lot of things wrong with that. 1. Olivia dies towards the beginning of Act 2. Tatum died in Act 3 at the party. 2. Their deaths aren't even remotely similar. The one similarity they had was left on the cutting room floor. 3. Olivia's death is described as the hot chick that is brutally savaged beyond recognition. And that's not really accurate to Tatum. And I think it's very reductive to suggest that Tatum was just the hot chick. Rose McGowan is gorgeous, but that character was funny and feisty and felt like a real person. If there's an analog to Tatum in 4, it's Kirby. It's also kind of lame to just flat out admit that Olivia means nothing other than her physical appearance. I just hate this cliche. A character existing just to be the hot one is so fucking dumb to me. It's a Hollywood movie. Everybody's hot. Our doofy cops look like this. I cannot tell you a single thing about Olivia. She doesn't have one personality trait. Like Olivia, the new characters are all underdeveloped. The movie has too many characters and not enough space to deal with them properly. I can see how this script got to be so long. Trevor and Deputy Hicks are here purely to be red herrings, and they are way overplayed. Their scenes are ridiculous, laying it on way too thick. There's a conversation between Sidney and Hicks in which the latter is hidden by shadows the entire time. Woodsboro doesn't feel like a real town anymore, just Crazyville with how these weirdos are acting. Kirby is the standout of the new cast. Hayden Panettiere is funny and has a lot of good lines. She very quickly became a fan favorite, but I don't think it's a great character. She's still underwritten and seems to lose all of her brain cells in her death scene. But it's a fun part and Panettiere is charming. Charlie is my least favorite Ghostface, not counting the bullshit TV show. Some of that is due to how little screen time he has. He is the most realistic Ghostface, to give them some credit. If something like Scream did happen, this kind of guy would absolutely be the one behind the mask. But he's really just here to play second fiddle because Jill needs a partner. His motivation is weak as fuck, which would be fine if he was more fun, Stu didn't have a motive, but he comes across as really whiny when you even notice he's there. Which brings us to Jill, the mastermind and main villain. First off, I do want to say that Emma Roberts is great. She can play these two extremes of the nicest girl you've ever met and the craziest. Crazy bitch Emma Roberts is hilarious. She's so much fun when she gets to let loose and be nuts. I love it. And there are a lot of cool subtle hints that she's the killer. When the classroom gets news of the opening kill, Jill is the only one to not check her phone because she already knows what happened. And anytime Jill is in a scary situation, but no one is looking at her, she has this blank expression on her face. I actually did call that it was Jill before the movie came out. She was the only logical choice to me. The killer had to be connected to both the original and the new characters. Jill is a better Ghostface than Charlie, but that is almost entirely due to Robert's performance. I think her motivation is really disappointing. I adore the dialogue sequences between Sidney and Ghostface. There's this rage in Ghostface that we've never seen before. I like the lines about the town Sidney left behind. Ghostface's dialogue hints towards a much more interesting motivation. Jill resents Sid because she's had to live her life in Sidney's shadow, and not really because of anything Sid did, but because of things that were done to Sid. She's a survivor, her one and only skill in Jill's eyes. That's a great line, by the way. And that ties really nicely into Sid not wanting to be a victim anymore. I could totally see that pressure and the narcissistic nature of social media and the internet sending her over the edge. I just think it's really poorly written. Most of her dialogue in that kitchen sequence is just how she wants to be famous and a lot of overwritten social commentary where the characters state the themes and ideas out loud. Jill, or Ghostface, being fame hungry doesn't really feel like a factor for the rest of the movie. It feels like something else is being set up, and then the fame thing comes almost out of nowhere. The potential of it is what frustrates me. Jill is so close to being great, and the clear rewrites and shoddy editing resulted in a rather messy character that doesn't live up to her potential, or the strong buildup of the film. Transitioning to the OGs, Dewey and Gale are deeply uninteresting in this one. They're fighting because that's all they ever do, and I just don't care anymore. They both have some funny lines, and the actors are of course great, but the movie doesn't have much for them to do. Sydney is disappointing. She's too together at the beginning of this story. She's got everything figured out. She's not a victim, she's whole. Fine. The issue is that she then has nowhere to go. She starts the movie saying she's not a victim, and then Jill turns her into a victim. And that could have worked had they played it up more, but it's no different than any other time Sydney has been through this. It's what baffled me when people got their panties in a bunch over Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. Luke failing and needing to learn something was the occasion for story. If he had everything figured out, the movie wouldn't need to exist. It would be pointless. That's kind of how I feel about Sid in Scream 4, and that ties back into the dialogue about the town she left behind. Sid should have been more flawed. She has this family here, and understandably, Sydney bolted first chance she got and never looked back. As Aunt Kate states, she has scars too. She lost her sister. That could have been an element to work in more. As is, there's nothing here. Sid put her life together, and then her cousin tries to viciously murder her. I've said it before, Sid is my favorite fictional character, and there are great moments with her. Some good dialogue, badass action moments, and it was a genuine thrill to see her on the big screen since I was too young to see the originals in theaters. I'm gonna complain about one more thing and then I'll say some nice stuff. This movie is the ugliest fucking thing. It's really overexposed and way too yellow. What the fuck happened there? Okay, nice things now. Marco Beltrami's score is fantastic. It's really intense, scary, and tragic. A lot of the new pieces are great, particularly the piece that plays during Jenny's death. Speaking of Jenny, the opening scene is genius. It's really hard for a new Scream film to surprise people because there's now a Scream formula and expectations of what a Scream movie is. The fact that they were able to craft a scene that genuinely surprised people is really impressive, and it's a really clever, fun scene. Love it. Olivia's death is brilliant. The suspense is masterful, the closet misdirect is so good, and the payoff even better. That scene is a big highlight of the series. Alison Brie is fucking hilarious, and her death scene is great. The small hints of what Trevor did and why Jenny was killed are great. I love that the movie never fully explains it. We know Trevor cheated on Jill, and when Ghostface called Jenny, she immediately asked if it was Trevor. I think the implication there is that Jenny was the other woman, and that's why Jill picked her to be the opening kill. I love the small scene between Sydney and Dewey on the couch. It's really sweet, and the movie could have used a lot more of that. Scream 4 grossed $97.1 million against a $40 million budget. It's hard to say whether it made a profit or not. If you don't know, the money it costs to advertise a film is not part of the budget, and it's not made public. The general rule is that a movie needs to make 2 to 3 times its budget in order to break even. Without knowing what Dimension spent on advertising, we don't really know. But it's safe to say that the box office was disappointing considering the business the original 3 films did. And Dimension never moved forward with the other parts of the trilogy, opting to instead make terrible TV shows on MTV and VH1. Reviews were mixed, but fans generally consider this to be the best of the sequels. I actually think it's the worst. Whatever problems the other films had, they always nailed Sydney. Even Scream 3. I felt what screen time she had was used well, and I love her story there. Like Scream 3, Sid doesn't have enough screen time here, and I don't think the movie quite knows what to do with her. I do not think this is a bad movie, by the way. Even at its worst, there is a lot to like. There's wonderful suspense, great dialogue, funny jokes, and interesting thematic ideas that have only become more relevant in the 10 years since its release. But it's so messy. The heavy rewrites and extensive editing are apparent. The movie never quite comes together as a whole. A lot of different elements work, and there are great individual scenes, but overall, it is disappointing, and I think the potential of what it could have been make watching it a bit of a frustrating experience.